Hello everyone, it's Meg and today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some books that I have read recently. It feels like it's not that long ago since I did one of these videos, but apparently it is, and I have quite a few books that have been stacking up that I've recently read, so I'm going to talk to you guys about them today. And this is quite a last minute filming and I just want a chill day and I cannot be asked wearing makeup, so we are having a super chilled video where with no makeup, we're just going to chill and I'm going to talk to you guys about all the books that I have read recently. So without further ado, let's get into the video. First book that I have on this list is Tinman by Sarah Winman. If you guys have been following my channel for a while, you know that Sarah Winman is one of my favourite authors and this is the only book of hers that I have not read, and obviously I was really looking forward to it. But I must admit, this did really let me down. This is her shortest work and it's very different compared to her other novels. The setting is totally different. It still covers similar topics such as like grief and love and family and friendship, but I just didn't connect with the story like I wish I could have. This is basically about two boys called Ellis and Michael, and it's basically about their relationship. And the first part of this book is told from Ellis's perspective, which is the after, I guess you could say. And the second part of this book is told from Michael's perspective, which is the before. And it's basically, like I said, it's about their relationship and about things that happens in their lives and how they come together and the people in their lives. And Sarah's writing is always beautiful. But the format of this book and just how it was written and the story, I just didn't connect with it as much, which I'm really disappointed about. I feel like I was struggling to get through bits at some point, and it's a very short book. Like, this should have taken me a week at the most to read, and it took me like maybe 2.5 weeks because I just couldn't read a lot of it at one time. And there were some bits that I did really fall in love with, like I really did enjoy the characters. I definitely enjoyed Michael's part a lot more than Ellis's part. But overall I was just really let down, which is such a shame as I really adore Sarah's writing and her other books so much. But hopefully if she comes out with another book in the future, I will definitely still be reading it and hopefully I will enjoy it a lot more than this. But yeah, a bit disappointing that I don't love it as much as other books, but I'm still glad that I have read all of her works so far nonetheless. The next book that I have is actually a non-fiction book, and that is The $1 Million Dog Brand by J. Nicole Smith. I'm sure quite a few of my regular viewers on here should know this, but if you don't, I am a pet photographer and I saw this book on somebody else's Instagram and I thought that it looked quite interesting, so I bought it and I read it and I actually really enjoyed it. So this is basically a book, it's a business book obviously, and it just goes through different stages of building the foundations and the building blocks for a successful pet business as a entrepreneur or petpreneurs, that's how you say it. And I did find this very, very useful. Like I said, there's a lot of useful information in here. It covers all sorts of different topics, obviously like marketing, business plans, all those other sorts of things. I won't go into too much detail because I'm sure not many of you are very interested in this book. The only thing that I wasn't a massive fan of, there were lots of different pet brands that were in here that had snippets from their founders about their experiences building their business and advice. And even though I did like that, I feel like there was a bit too much of that and not enough of our author's own words in here. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I have underlined a lot of it in here. I've done some tabbing and now I'm in the stages of kind of putting what I've learnt from this book into practice with my own business. So I really enjoyed it and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next up I have The Paper and Heart Society by Lucy Powery. Lucy is a fellow UK booktuber, and when I heard that she was coming out with a book, then obviously I knew I had to read it and to support her. This is the first book in a 4-book series, I believe. And this first book follows a girl named Tabby who has just moved to a new town, and she finds this book club and she becomes friends with them, and basically they go on all these sorts of bookish adventures, and it was a very enjoyable read. I really enjoyed the characters in this. I feel like that was my favourite part. I especially loved Olivia and Henry and Ed. Ed was awesome, I loved him. And I love how it was a book about books and how much all these characters loved their books and how different their reading tastes were, yet they could still come together and talk about all things bookish. Some of the things that I wasn't a massive fan of, Tabby makes some very silly decisions in this book. There are certain times where you just kind of want to shake her and tell her to get herself together, or like, what are you doing? Like, I found that a bit frustrating. And there's a little bit of a subplot between Tabby and somebody from her old school in this as well. And it includes like online bullying and stuff as well. And Tabby has anxiety, and suffers from panic attacks, which you can definitely see and I feel like is very accurate, as I believe Lucy also suffers with her mental health and anxiety. So this is an Own Voices novel as well. But even though there were some things that I wasn't absolutely in love with about this story, I feel like it is still very enjoyable, an absolutely wonderful bookish read, perfect for all of you book nerds out there, which I feel like is appropriate seeing as we are on BookTube and all we do is make videos talking about books. So I will definitely be picking up the second book in this series, which I believe follows a different character, which is Olivia, I believe. The title and stuff has already been announced, so I believe that's coming out at some point next year. So I'm very much looking forward to continue with these series and these characters, and overall I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I have on this list is my very first book I have ever DNF'd, and that is Summer Days and Summer Nights, which is edited by Stephanie Perkins. This is a short story collection about 12 summer romances, and this book was very different compared to how I thought it would be. I listened to this book on audiobook, and I don't know whether it was because of the audiobook. Obviously there's loads of different narrators in here because of all the different stories, but I felt like I was kind of pulling myself through. There wasn't that many stories that I enjoyed. I got over halfway through. I had maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 stories left, but I was at a point where I was just like, I have no idea what's going on in these stories. I do not know what's happening and I don't desperately care. So I decided to DNF it because there's so many other books that I want to read and that I want to listen to an audiobook, and I didn't really want to waste my time on a book that I knew I wasn't going to really enjoy. I haven't really read many short story collections, or in a very long time at least, so for me it's also the adaptation of trying to get used to reading or listening to stories that are a lot shorter, that obviously kind of start and resolve in like, I don't know, 100 pages, something like that. So obviously that was very different for me, but I just wasn't interested in many of the stories, unfortunately, and the stories were different, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. They were just different to how I was expecting them to be. And yeah, I'm really sad that I didn't like this book as much as I thought I would, but nonetheless it's a new experience for me reading a short story collection, and hopefully I will have some more luck with future short stories collections when I eventually get to them. Next up I have the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaffer and Annie Burrows. This book has been on the shelf in the living room downstairs for ages, and I finally picked it up fairly recently, and oh my god, what a gem. Obviously I have heard of this book. I feel like quite a few people have heard of this book even if you haven't read it, because there is a film adaptation, and my mum has read this book and she really enjoyed it. She said it was so wonderful, so I picked it up and I absolutely love it so much. This book is told in letter format about a woman named Julia who is a journalist and a writer, and one day she receives a letter from a man in Guernsey, and this story takes place just after the Second World War. This story takes place just after the Second World War has ended. So basically Juliet starts to receive letters from all of these people who were living on Guernsey during the World War II period when the Germans were occupying Germany, and it's basically about their experiences, and basically it's about their story. I am not a massive historical fiction fan. I feel like most of you guys should know that by now, especially when it comes to like the wars like World War I and II. It's just personally not my thing. But I really enjoyed this book. I absolutely love the characters. I love our main character Julia. I thought she was amazing. I love Sydney, her best friend. And I loved all of the characters who were living on Guernsey. They were amazing. And just kind of seeing their relationships build and hearing the stories and what they went through during the war and how they created this book society that wasn't meant to be a book society. You kind of have to read it to see what I mean about that. But it was definitely a character-driven story, and it's just so wonderful. It is one of those books where you cannot stop smiling throughout. It gives you all those really good warm fuzzy feelings, and I love it with all of my heart. This is now one of my favourite books of all time and of the year. I will 100% be returning to this in the future, and it just gives you all those warm fuzzy feels. So if you have heard of this book but not picked it up yet, then I would 100% recommend it. You will not be disappointed. It is just an absolute joy to read, and I will definitely be returning to it in the future over the years. So obviously I had to give this a 5 out of 5 stars. Next up, we are starting on the books that I read for the Gilmore Girls Readathon, and whilst I'm filming this video, I am at the Gilmore Girls Readathon is actually still taking place, but I have so many books that I really need to just make a video talking about them. So the last 4 books for this video are all the books that I've read so far for the Gilmore Girls Readathon. So the first one that I have read is Legendary by Stephanie Garber, which is the 3rd book in the Caraval trilogy. I read Caraval when it came out in 2017, I believe, so about 2 years ago, and it was only the 2nd fantasy book that I read, and I haven't read a fantasy book since then, so this is only my 3rd fantasy book. And fantasy isn't really my thing, or I originally thought so, because I'm not into it. I find it hard to find stories that I feel like I will enjoy, and I feel like contemporary is definitely my favourite genre. But this book really surprised me, and I really enjoyed it so much more than I thought I was going to. In this 2nd book we follow Tella as our main protagonist instead of Scarlett, who is the main protagonist in the 1st book, and I don't know, there's just something about this book. I really enjoyed the characters. I feel like I did enjoy it a lot more than Caraval, but then again, in the past 2 years since I read Caraval, my reading tastes have changed and developed and grown, and I've grown so much as a reader, so I feel like going back to the series, and especially being a fantasy book, I'm able to kind of just enjoy it more, really. And it was just so much fun to read. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to be picking the last book, which is Finale, up after the readathon has finished, because I cannot wait to see what happens and how the story concludes. And it's just a really fun series altogether. I love the world and the magic and everything about it, and I'm really glad that I did decide to carry on with this series, because I was debating whether to or not. But in the end, I'm really glad that I did. So overall, I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars even. I swear that's the highest I've ever rated a fantasy book. Next up for the Gilmore Girls Readathon, I read Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This came out fairly recently, within the past month, and it is a graphic novel, obviously, but it's written by Rainbow Rowell. But it's basically Rainbow Rowell's romance story, but in a graphic novel. And I was really interested to see how that would lay out, how that would portray, and in the end I did really enjoy it. This book is basically about 2 kids that work in a pumpkin patch on their final year before they go off to college, and it's a romance, like I said before, and I did really enjoy it. I loved the humour in here, like I did when I read Fangirl. I love Rainbow Rowell's humour that she puts into her characters, and the characters are wonderful. I do feel like the romance at the end kind of came up a little too quickly, But overall, I did really enjoy this book, and the art style is lovely. I think it's so cute. And like I said, the characters were so much fun, and overall it was a wonderful autumnal read, and I'm really glad I picked it up, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Second to last book on here is one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Azevedo. If you guys have watched one of my previous recent read videos, then you will know how much I loved the Poet X. I put off reading it for ages, and I finally picked it up a couple of months ago. Absolutely fell in love with it, so I could not wait to read Elizabeth's second novel. This basically follows a girl named Amani who is a teen mum, which is something I've never read about before, and she is into cooking, and it's basically about her life through her senior year, about being a mum, about living with her abuela, about the relationship between her and her daughter's father, and about her future basically, and obviously about cooking because she takes a culinary class. I must admit, I did not enjoy this book as much as I thought I was going to, probably because I built the hype up for myself so much, and it took me at least 100 pages to fully get into the story. But once I was in it, I was really invested in it, and I love Amani as a main character. I love all the characters in general, to be honest, but Amani is so headstrong and so determined and independent, and she's an absolutely amazing, strong character, which I absolutely love. And I love her passion for cooking, especially as somebody who also loves to cook, and I especially love baking. And in here they also go on a trip to Seville, which is also a place that I went to for university, but I went there because I was studying photography, so I was taking photos, not cooking food. But I must admit, when they were talking about Seville, it didn't seem as vivid as, or it didn't sound like the Seville that I went to, but I still really like that factor, and it's just a really wonderful story about coming of age and kind of discovering what you want to do in life, and also a glimpse into the life of what it's like to be a teen mum, as that is something that I've never read about before. So overall, I did really enjoy this book, even though it didn't quite live up to the hype that I had put myself up for. But I really enjoyed it nonetheless, and I've still continued to read every book that Elizabeth writes, so overall I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I have in this video is one that I just completed last night and absolutely fell in love with, and that is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. I have seen this graphic novel around for a while. I have been wanting to read it for ages. So I decided to read it for this readathon, and thankfully I loved it to pieces. I read it yesterday. Technically it's not very long, obviously it's a graphic novel, so I could read it in less than a day, but I actually stayed up until 11:30, which is late for me, to finish reading it, and it was just what I needed this week. Yesterday. It was just such a joy. This story is about a prince named Sebastian, and he hires a seamstress called Frances to basically make his dresses, and during the day he is a prince and at night he is Lady Crystalia, and he is like a fashion icon around Paris, and it is about his and France's relationships, and it also discusses important topics such as sexuality and things like friendship and family, and kind of the social status, like the statuses of like royal families during certain times. And it's just such a wonderful, heartwarming, joyous story, and I could not stop smiling and I could not put it down. So I am so glad that I finally picked it up. I'm definitely going to have to get myself a physical copy of this book because I read it on Scribd, but a physical copy is definitely in order. I am tempted to reread it very soon actually, because it made me smile so much, and it's just such a heartwarming read. So if you are looking for a lovely, wonderful, quick, easy, heartwarming read that will brighten your day, I definitely recommend this book. So of course I had to give it a 5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I have read recently. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and seeing all the books that I've read recently. There are definitely some favourites, some ones that I wasn't a massive fan of, even my first DNF'd book, which is a new experience for me and something that I definitely going to try and do more often if I am not enjoying a book, because obviously there's no point in reading one if I don't enjoy it. If you like this video, then please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to see more bookish videos from me, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and little bell icon so you'll be noted every time I post a new video. As always, I will leave the links to my social media along with the links to my Goodreads and my blog in the description down below for you guys. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!